My name is Blanche, 34 years old, living in Portland and working as an interior designer. For 6 months, I nearly exhausted myself turning a rundown house into my dream home. I painted every wall, rebuilt the garden with my own hands, hired trusted workers to fix the roof. Every detail was my labor and my pride. But one afternoon when I came home early, I froze. My parents, my brother, and my sister-in-law were standing in the master bedroom, hiring painters to cover the walls in a glaring pink. They casually said, "We're fixing the room for Jake and Samantha to move in." The house I had poured sweat into was treated like their common property. If it were you, how would you react when your own family trampled that boundary? Leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe to the channel because the next part of this story holds even more unbelievable shocks. I grew up in a family where, from childhood, I was labeled stubborn, disobedient. My parents always said Jake, my brother, was the one who knew how to save face for the family. And me, according to them, I always did whatever I wanted, never listened to the adults. Maybe that's why all comparisons, all praise in the house always went to Jake, even when he didn't really accomplish anything. Jake had a reputation for laziness since high school. He preferred hanging out with friends over studying, and after graduating college he couldn't hold a job for more than a few months. But to my parents, every failure was wrapped in excuses. Jake just hasn't found the right opportunity. Jake is smart, but this society is too harsh. I heard those lines so often I could recite them, excuses shielding his dependence. Then when Jake married Samantha, things got even worse. Samantha had a pretty face, always dressed well, but almost never held a steady job. She spent most of her time on photo shoots and videos for social media, hoping to become an influencer. I knew well her account never had more than a few thousand followers, yet at family dinners Samantha always spoke proudly. "All it takes is one big brand noticing me and I could earn double your salary in a month." I gave a faint smile, saying nothing. I knew her numbers couldn't compare to my real work. What bothered me wasn't her bragging but the contempt in her eyes, as if my achievements meant nothing. In my family, Samantha quickly became my parents' ally. They liked her because she was gentle, kept appearances, unlike me, the one they always labeled headstrong, unwilling to yield. At every weekend dinner, when I shared about a new project at work, my parents' eyes were indifferent. But when Samantha mentioned a brand had sent her a box of cosmetics in exchange for a few promotional photos, the table lit up with praise. Sometimes I wondered if my parents ever really listened to me. I'll never forget the time I got promoted at work. One of my proudest moments. I had barely sat down at the table when my mother turned to Jake, worry in her voice. "Son, how's your job? Is everything stable?" Jake shrugged, replying flatly, "It's okay, Mom, I'll probably switch soon." And just like that, the rest of the meal revolved around how Jake needed support, while my achievement vanished as if it never existed. When I decided to buy that rundown house, my family's reaction was no different. I still remember that Sunday dinner, my excitement overflowing as I told them I'd found a house, old and worn but full of potential with a surprisingly cheap price. Before I even finished, Samantha shot me a look and burst out laughing. "Sounds like a money trap. Are you planning to turn yourself into the house's slave?" Jake immediately joined in. "Seriously, Blanche. Instead of buying that dump, you should get a newly built apartment. Clean, tidy, no repairs needed." My father shook his head, raising his glass as if to emphasize his words. "Daughter, a house like that will drain your money. It'll turn into a bottomless pit." My mother added, "Be more practical. You're a woman, you need stability, a place easy to maintain, not a lifelong construction project." I felt the whole table united against me. In my mind, I pictured the peeling walls, the leaking roof, the overgrown yard I had seen. But alongside that, I saw the potential. A bright kitchen, a sunlit garden, a cozy living room where I could light candles on winter nights. I lifted my head, looking each of them in the eye. I know it will take work and money, but I believe I can do it. And more importantly, I want a space of my own, not to live forever in rented apartments. The table fell silent for a few seconds. Then Samantha sneered, muttering loud enough for all to hear. "Sounds like one of those home renovation shows that end in disaster." Jake burst out laughing. My parents shook their heads in disappointment. I said nothing more, but inside my decision was set. That night, driving home, I felt sadness and anger choking me. But at the same time, I felt a surge of powerful energy. All my life I had been called stubborn, and maybe it was true. But this time that stubbornness was exactly what kept me standing. I wanted to prove I wasn't delusional, that I could turn ruins into a real home. The memories of being overlooked in childhood, the dinners where I faded behind Samantha's mocking words, all of it became fuel. I didn't buy that house to defy them, but deep down, I knew I longed to prove my choice had worth. And maybe, from that very moment, the seeds of conflict in my family began to take root. I remember vividly the first day I stepped into that house with a brand new set of keys. Outside, the paint peeled in patches, the porch creaked in the wind. Inside, the carpet was stained, the walls cracked as if ready to collapse. To others it was a mess, but I saw a future. To them it was worthless, but to me it was freedom, a testament to the resilience and determination I had carried for years. I threw myself into renovation with all my energy. By day I worked at the design firm, and at night I rolled up my sleeves, tearing out old carpet, scraping moldy paint, rehanging broken doors. On winter nights, I lit a single small lamp in the living room, my hand trembling with cold as I painted, but my heart was burning. Every fresh stroke on the wall was a declaration: this is my space. I created it. I didn't do it all alone. The tradesmen I had worked with before agreed to help me for a fraction of the price. I remember the first morning Mike, the electrician, stood in the living room staring at the tangled wires and sighing, "Blanche, this place is a ticking time bomb. But don't worry, I'll redo it from scratch." I smiled and replied, "I trust you. As long as it's safe, I can take care of the rest in time." We worked side by side for weeks. Mike bent over rewiring outlets and I helped, learning to connect wires to install bulbs. The first time the lights flicked on, the dark room came alive and my eyes stung with tears. The backyard was another challenge. When I first bought the house, it was like a wild patch, knee-high weeds, trash scattered everywhere. I swung a machete, my hands bleeding from thorns, my back aching, but patches of soil slowly appeared under the sun. One afternoon I sank onto the porch, sweat soaking my shirt, staring at the cleared ground with joy. I saw the future space for a wooden table, for friends to gather in summer, for candles to glow on peaceful evenings. I wasn't always strong. Some days it rained for 3 days straight, water dripping through the roof in long streaks across the ceiling. I remained in the middle of the room, rainwater plinking into buckets, despair washing over me. I remember calling my mother, hoping for some comfort. But all I heard was a sigh. "You see, I told you from the beginning. This house will only bring you misery." I stayed silent, hung up the phone. My tears blended with the rain. But then I told myself, this is my choice and I won't give up. When the floors were polished and the scratches disappeared, I walked barefoot step by step, feeling the change under my feet. When the new kitchen was finished, with its gleaming sink and shining wooden counters, I invited a few co-workers over for dinner. They marveled, unable to believe that in just a few months, a ruined house had turned into such a vibrant space. Every square foot of the house carried my determination. I remember one evening, after finishing painting the bedroom, I lay on the floor, staring at the freshly painted white ceiling, the smell of paint still strong. I smiled faintly, whispering to myself, "No one can take this feeling away from me. This is a small victory, but it's worth everything." Each corner of the house wasn't only a material transformation, but a spiritual journey. I learned to believe in myself, to be patient, and most importantly, I learned to give myself the recognition I had waited years for from my parents but never received. One afternoon, when I finished the final wall in the living room, I stopped for a long time. Looking around, the house was no longer ruins. It was a space I had created with my own hands, with the stubbornness they had mocked, with the belief that I deserved a true home. On the day of my housewarming, the Portland sky was unusually clear. From early morning, I had set the table on the porch, strung warm yellow lights along the new fence. Friends, coworkers, and even a few curious neighbors, who remembered this place as the ugliest house on the block, all gasped in surprise. They walked from room to room, praising every detail: the shining kitchen, the cozy living room with polished wooden floors. I smiled, pouring more wine for the guests. In their eyes, I saw the recognition I had longed for all my life. The party started at 6 o'clock, but it wasn't until about 7:15 that I heard a car pulling up outside. I immediately recognized my parents' familiar silver SUV. Jake stepped out first, face tight with annoyance. Samantha followed, wearing a pink-fitted dress, phone in hand, as if ready to snap a photo of any dusty shelf to post online. My parents walked slowly behind, their faces showing plain displeasure, as if they had been forced to come. I opened the door, polite smile on my lips. "You're here, please come in." As they stepped inside, all four of their eyes swept across the living room. I clearly saw the fleeting shock in my parents' gaze. They hadn't expected the house they once called a money trap to transform so completely. My mother reached out, gently touching the wooden table, whispering, "My goodness, it's so clean." But right then Samantha began her own inspection. She circled the room, head tilted down, hand brushing the wall like a judge scoring a contestant. Her eyes narrowed, lips pressed tight. Every time someone praised something, she smirked and looked away. I kept talking with the guests, pretending not to notice, but I still caught glimpses of Samantha slipping down the hallway, then disappearing upstairs. I guess she was evaluating the bedroom. Sure enough, minutes later she came down, her voice loud enough for those nearby. "The master bedroom is awful. The paint is so cheap I couldn't live in it." The cheerful atmosphere sank. I set my glass on the table, met her eyes, and said calmly but pointedly, "When you have your own house, you can paint it any color you want. Even pink." In an instant, Samantha's face flushed red. The guests went silent, some stifling their smiles. Jake touched her shoulder, murmuring, "Come on, Sam." But Samantha spun around, snatching her purse. She stomped toward the door, snapping, "Let's go, Jake. Staying here feels like torture." Jake looked at me, awkward, as if wanting to say something, but bowed his head and followed her out. My parents froze for a moment, their eyes heavy with disappointment, though I couldn't tell if it was for me or for their daughter-in-law storming off. Then they sighed, shook their heads, and turned to leave too. The door closed, leaving me with stunned guests. A coworker came up, whispering, "Don't mind them, Blanche. Everyone can see how beautiful this house is." I forced a smile, pouring them more wine. Slowly, the laughter and music filled the silence again. I went on showing friends the upstairs, pointing out every detail I had worked on. But deep down, I knew the seed of hostility had been planted in that very moment. That night, after the guests had left, I stood alone in the living room. The yellow light glowed against the freshly painted walls, the garden outside sinking into still darkness. I touched the smooth paint, remembering Samantha's scornful eyes. For her, the fact that I had a solid home, a thing she had never achieved, was an unbearable thorn. I closed my eyes, breathed deeply, and told myself, "This house is not just property, it's my strength. And I will protect it no matter who tries to belittle or take it." A few weeks after the tense housewarming, my mother called, inviting me to Sunday dinner as usual. Her voice was unusually gentle, which surprised me. I had thought after what happened they would avoid me for a while. But in the end I agreed. Partly because I missed the taste of family meals, partly because I wanted to see what they were planning to say. That evening, my mother's kitchen smelled as familiar as ever, filled with roasted meat and fresh bread. My father sat at the head of the table, his eyes more contemplative than usual. Jake and Samantha were already there, dressed neatly as if ready for a serious negotiation. I stepped in, nodded in greeting, keeping my composure. The meal began in uneasy stillness. We chatted idly, the weather, my father's work, small headlines in the paper. As I cut my meat, I felt a dark cloud hanging over the table, waiting to break. Then my mother set down her fork and knife, forcing a smile. "Blanche, I want to talk to you about something." There was hesitation in her eyes, like she was testing my reaction. "Jake and Samantha have been struggling. You know, the economy isn't easy. They're looking for a place, but rents are so high." She paused, then added softly, "I think if you let them stay in your house for a while it would help." Just as I expected. The entire dinner had been a prelude to this request. I put my fork down, keeping my voice even. "I'm sorry, but no. I've been very clear. I don't want anyone else living in my house." The air instantly tightened. My father frowned, setting his glass of water down hard. "Daughter, that's your brother. Helping for a while isn't such a big deal." I turned to him, struggling to stay calm. "Dad, I spent half a year renovating that house. It's my work and my peace. I won't turn it into a place for more conflict." Before I could finish, Samantha laughed bitterly, her sharp voice ringing across the table. "You really are selfish and arrogant, Blanche. It's just an old house and you act like it's treasure." Others need help and you stick your nose in the air. I turned, staring at her. The memory of the housewarming flashed in my mind, her sneers, her contempt. I spoke each word slowly. Funny. It was your mouth that called my house a pigsty. And now you want to move in? Samantha's face changed instantly. She flushed red, eyes blazing, but couldn't form a comeback. Jake quickly jumped in, pleading, Sis, I'm really in trouble. The company cut my pay, we can't afford rent. I'm just asking to stay a short while. I shook my head. Jake, you're healthy. You can find more work. And Samantha, do. This isn't about no choice, it's about your responsibility. You don't understand anything. Jake snapped, his face red. Your brother is suffering and you. My father cut him off, his voice heavy. Blanche, sometimes you have to put family first. I looked around the table at their faces pressing in on me. My heart pounded, but I spoke slowly, clearly. I have thought about it. And I know my boundaries. My house is not a place for others to barge in. Samantha shot up, her chair screeching. I knew it. You always think you're better than everyone. Got yourself a house and now you look down on us. I curled my lips into a faint smile. If that's how you see it, fine. But no matter what you think, you'll never live in my house. In that moment, the kitchen exploded. Samantha stormed upstairs into my old room, her heels pounding on the stairs. Jake slammed his fork and knife down, growling, You're really cruel, Blanche. My mother sat frozen, her eyes welling with tears. My father shook his head as if watching an unavoidable family tragedy. I sat still, my heart heavy, but without regret. Everyone left their plates unfinished. I picked up my bag and said hoarsely, my voice tight with restraint, I'm leaving. I don't want to argue anymore. I knew from that moment on, a hidden war within the family had begun. The moment I opened the master bedroom door and saw my entire family there, with strangers painting the wall a blinding pink, my heart clenched. They had barged into the home I had poured myself into, treating it as if it were theirs to decide over. That night, when I drove them all out and slammed the door shut, I knew I couldn't let it happen ever again. I called Mike right away, the electrician who had once helped me. He heard the tremble in my voice over the phone and simply replied, I'll come. Tonight we'll change every lock. In less than an hour, Mike arrived with his full kit. The front door, the back door, the garage. All replaced. The clicking of tools echoed through the night, replacing the unease gnawing at me. Now no one can use the old keys anymore, Mike said, wiping sweat from his forehead. But I'd recommend installing a camera system too. That thought had already struck me the moment I saw Samantha holding a measuring tape, muttering about where the crib should go in my bedroom. I knew clearly, this was no longer family conflict. This was intrusion. The next morning I went straight to a security company. A young technician named Daniel came to inspect. He walked around the house, taking notes while explaining, We'll put cameras at every entry point, both front and back. In the yard, I suggest a wide-angle view. The system links directly to your phone, alarms instantly if someone tries to break in. I never imagined I'd have to turn my home into a fortress just to guard against my own relatives. But if I didn't protect myself, no one else would. That afternoon, as workers drilled holes to install the system, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. I hesitated for a second, then picked up. You really changed the locks. Her voice was heavy with reproach. Blanche, you're blowing everything out of proportion. I gripped the phone tighter. Mom, they barged into my house without permission. They repainted my bedroom. If strangers did that, you'd call the police right away. Why should I stay silent just because it's them? My mother sighed. But they're family, sweetheart. It's because they're family that it hurts even more. I whispered, then hung up. That night, once the system was in place, I looked at my phone screen displaying 4 small boxes from 4 camera angles. The images were clear enough to catch every leaf swaying on the porch. I exhaled long and heavy. For the first time since the pink wall incident, I felt a hint of peace. I decided to repaint the bedroom myself as a ritual to erase the violation. I bought the exact color I had chosen in the first place. Soft gray, gentle, catching the morning light. I opened the window, played soft music, carefully covered the floor with tarp, then painted stroke after stroke. My hands ached, but each brush line felt like it erased another scar inside me. When the final wall dried, I sat down in a chair, staring at the room restored to its true self. In the days that followed, I focused on work but always glanced at my phone whenever a motion alert popped up. At first, my heart raced every time I saw a shadow passing the gate. But gradually, I grew used to living with cameras, like having invisible guards watching over me. One evening, working late at the kitchen table, my phone chimed. The app warned, "Motion at back door." I instantly opened the live video, heart pounding. It turned out to be just the neighbor's cat leaping over the fence. I laughed, relieved. Maybe that was how I began to feel less fear, replaced by a sense of control. I started sharing the story with a few close colleagues. One of them, Anna, placed her hand on my shoulder, eyes full of sympathy. "You did the right thing. No one, not even family, has the right to ignore your boundaries." I nodded, though a sting remained in my heart. I never wanted to turn family into outsiders. But they had forced me into this corner. That night, I sat in my study, desk lamp glowing over unfinished sketches. My phone buzzed nonstop. On the screen flashed red words, "Motion alert, front door." My chest tightened as I tapped the app. The image was crystal clear. Jake, my brother, standing at the door. He tried fitting his key, twisting it over and over. His face twisted with frustration when he realized it no longer worked. I held my breath, watching. Seconds later, Jake went back to his car, opened the trunk, and pulled out a crowbar. When I saw him advancing toward the door, jamming the iron bar into the frame, a chill ran down my spine. The alarm wailed, lights flashing wildly. Jake jolted, eyes darting, then panicked. He threw the crowbar to the ground and bolted to his car, tires screeching as he sped off. The footage was undeniable. My own flesh and blood had tried to break into my home, to tear open the door I had fought to protect. The very next morning, I drove straight to the police station. When the officer at the desk asked why, I handed him my phone and played the recording. On the video, Jake's face was lit under the sensor light, eyes shifty, crowbar jammed at the door. There was no excuse left. "I want to file charges for attempted break-in," I said firmly. The officer nodded, taking notes. When the paperwork was done, he looked at me with a mix of surprise and sympathy. "I know this is hard, but you did the right thing. No one gets to cross your boundaries, not even family." That night, just as I stepped out of the shower, my phone rang. It was my mother. Before I could say anything, her voice burst out, choked with tears. "Blanche, what have you done? The police just came and took Jake. Do you realize you're destroying this family?" I clutched the phone, kept my voice steady. "No, Mom. They destroyed it when they tried to take what was mine. He's your brother." She sobbed. "He was desperate, that's why he acted out. By doing this, you're throwing him into prison." I closed my eyes, the image of Jake with the crowbar flashing in my mind. I answered slowly, "Mom, I've given him too many chances. I told everyone clearly that no one was to live with me, and still they forced it. I can't let my home turn into a battleground again." Only her muffled crying. Then my father grabbed the phone, his voice filled with anger. "You think you're strong? One day you'll regret turning your back on your blood." I listened, said nothing, and quietly hung up. In the days after, my phone buzzed endlessly with messages from Jake, from Samantha, from my parents. "Please withdraw the report. We'll never bother you again. It was a mistake, we promise we'll change." Some messages begged, others threatened, but I gave no reply. I left them to stew in the fear they had created for themselves. On Saturday night, another call came from my mother. This time, her voice was trembling, not sharp. "Sweetheart, Jake is about to lose his job. This will ruin his future. Can you please withdraw the report?" I staring at the streetlights spilling across the sidewalk, my chest heavy as stone. I knew I could save Jake from this stain. But I also knew if I backed down, I would lose the boundary I had carved out with blood and tears. I answered softly but firmly, "I'm not ruining Jake's future. He did that himself when he picked up the crowbar. If I withdraw, it's the same as saying what he did is excusable." My mother sobbed harder. I heard my father's voice break in rough. "You've really changed." I closed my eyes, letting tears slip down, but I didn't waver. I knew if I compromised this time, there would be more times. And eventually, the home I built would no longer be mine. The evening after the police came to Jake's house, my phone rang non-stop. Message after message poured in, please mixed with bitter reproach. I stayed silent, letting them drown in the panic they had brought on themselves. Until my mother's name lit up on the screen and I hesitated, then answered. Her voice shook, catching in her throat. "Blanche, Please withdraw the report. I'm begging you. From now on, I promise we'll leave you alone, never let this happen again. I swear. In that moment, I could hear the wall clock ticking each second in the quiet room. I knew this was the one chance to set the terms once and for all. If I withdraw, I said slowly, then from now on no one in the family comes near this house again. No keys, no dropping by, no moving in. If anyone tries, I'll call the police immediately. My mother went speechless. On the other end, I heard my father sigh heavily, then Jake burst into tears, shouting, "You're cutting me out of the family. You're so cruel, Blanche." I closed my eyes, kept my voice cold. "No, you pushed yourself out the moment you showed up at my door with a crowbar." A heavy stillness lingered, then my mother whispered, "Fine. We agree. As long as you withdraw the charges." The next morning, I went to the police station and signed the withdrawal papers. The officer nodded. "Are you sure? This is solid evidence, we can proceed." I looked at him, my voice dry. "I know. But I want peace." Jake was released that very afternoon. He escaped criminal charges, but the trace of the incident stayed in his record. I heard later that every time he applied for a new job, people questioned him, and the rumor of the run-in with the police spread quickly in the small community. Friends avoided him, neighbors whispered. A week later, I ran into a family acquaintance at the supermarket. She looked at me and lowered her voice. "I heard about it. Mary's son got his name recorded by the police for attempted break-in. That's something." I nodded slightly, offering no explanation. The news traveled faster than the wind, and I knew Jake was tasting the cost of his actions. As for me, the house returned to quiet. No more sudden knocks at the door, no more scrutinizing eyes in every corner. But that quiet wasn't just peace, it was distance. I felt clearly the fracture had taken shape. My parents almost disappeared from my life. No more calls inviting me to Sunday dinner, no more hurried check-in texts. In their place was a long. I knew that, in their eyes, I was the child who had shamed the family by bringing in the police. One day I ran into Jake outside a coffee shop. He looked gaunt, his clothes wrinkled. When he saw me, his eyes flickered with anger, then dimmed into shame. He muttered, Do you know how people look at me now? Everywhere I go they whisper." I set my coffee down, met his eyes. "Jake, that's the consequence of your own actions. You can't blame anyone but yourself." He clenched his jaw, started to speak, but then walked off, shoulders sagging as if carrying the weight of the sky. That night, I sat in my living room looking around my house. The walls still gleamed, the backyard still bloomed, and the cameras blinked their little lights, signaling I was safe. But inside me, a quiet crack had opened. I knew I had traded peace for distance from my own blood. And from then on, we would never be the same again. 6 months passed since the day I laid down the condition that my family stay away from this house. No phone buzzing with accusations, no flood of pleading or threatening texts. I had grown so used to the noise that when it vanished, it took time to learn how to enjoy the quiet. I threw myself into work, taking on bigger projects. The company valued my management skills, and after years of effort, I was promoted to team lead. Each morning, I stepped into my new office, sunlight flooding through the window, colleagues bustling around me, and pride swelled in my chest. Around that time, I began letting myself open up. Ethan, a coworker who had quietly helped me find cheaper materials, gradually became someone I could talk to after hours. At first, quick coffees, then late-night design talks turned into casual dinners at a small restaurant near the office. Ethan listened patiently, never judging. One time, when I sighed about how my family had pushed me away, he simply said, "Sometimes distance is the only way to breathe." His words made me cry because for the first time, someone understood without me having to justify myself. My new life was so calm I nearly forgot the chaos of months past. Until one afternoon, picking vegetables at the local grocery store, I heard a familiar voice. "Blanche." I turned and saw Lisa, my distant cousin, my aunt's daughter. We hugged, exchanged cheerful greetings. After some small talk, Lisa lowered her voice, her eyes uneasy. "I heard Jake and Samantha moved back in with your parents. You knew about that, right?" I froze, shook my head. Lisa went on, almost whispering, "Samantha's pregnant. The whole family's in turmoil over money. Jake's still unemployed and your dad had to dip into savings for them. I heard your mom even took a side job at the library to help cover costs." The same people who once mocked me for wasting money on a wreck were now breaking themselves to support Jake and Samantha's choices. Part of me felt bitter, but another part only felt relieved. That evening, driving home, I sat in the garage for a long time before stepping inside. Through the window, I saw the familiar glow of yellow light in the living room, the gray painted walls I had restored. I whispered to myself, at least it's no longer my burden. The next day I told Ethan over morning coffee. He gently asked, "Do you feel guilty?" Of course. They're my family, how could I not? But I can't save them forever. I chose to save myself first. Ethan set his hand on the table, silent. That silence was enough to soothe me. A few weeks later, I saw one of my mother's old friends at church. She quietly pulled me aside and whispered, "Your parents look so tired. They keep worrying about Jake and his wife and now with a baby on the way, but they never mention you." Hearing that, my heart clenched. I knew I had been written out. I was no longer part of the family's story. But I also knew I might be the one swallowed whole in that spiral. One Monday morning, I opened my computer to prepare for a client meeting and saw a new message in my inbox. The subject line in all caps, "The baby needs a home." The sender, Samantha. I froze for a long time, my finger hovering over the mouse. A strange mix of weariness and curiosity welled up. I clicked open. The first line was a plea. "Blanche, I know you hate me. But things are different now. I'm about to give birth, and this baby needs a room of its own, a place to grow up. Please think of blood ties, of family." The following paragraphs dragged on, repeating how Jake was unemployed, how my parents were exhausted, and how, "The house is so big, surely you can share a little." She wrote, "A baby is innocent. It needs a home, and you could give it that with one nod." In my mind, the image of the master bedroom appeared, where they had once brazenly brought in painters, claiming it as theirs. I imagined coming home to find a crib in the corner, rainbow decals on the walls, and myself pushed out of my own space. The thought made my chest ache. My phone buzzed. Ethan texted, "Ready for the meeting? I'll swing by." I typed back, "Okay, 10 minutes. But truthfully, I couldn't leave the desk right away. I stared at the screen a little longer, then pressed print. The machine hummed, sliding out the sheet. I folded it carefully, slipped it into an envelope, and carried it to the basement. In the corner stood the safe I had bought after Jake's incident. I opened it, placed the envelope among other important documents. When the metal door shut with a heavy clang, I felt a strange relief. As if I had sealed the past once and for all. That afternoon, waiting for food at the small restaurant, I told Ethan. He listened quietly, then asked, "Do you feel guilty?" I leaned my chin on my hand, eyes drifting out the window to the Portland drizzle. "Of course I do. But if I open the door again, I'll lose everything I've built. They don't need a room. They need someone to carry their lives for them. And I can't be that person." Ethan said nothing but reached for my hand. That simple gesture reminded me I wasn't alone anymore. In the days that followed, more messages came from Samantha. Sometimes long, sometimes just, "The baby needs you." I didn't reply. I had set my boundary and I had to hold it. One evening my mother called. Her voice was hoarse. "You're really going to leave the baby like this? It's my grandchild, and your niece or nephew." I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply. "Mom, I'm not abandoning anyone. But I won't let them turn my life into shelter for their mistakes." I heard her break into sobs. I sat still, eyes wet, but didn't change my mind. That night I stepped into the backyard. The porch light cast a gentle glow on the flower beds I had planted with my own hands. I sat on the wooden chair looking around the house. For 6 months, it had truly become my home, the result of every drop of sweat, every brushstroke, every sleepless night. This house is not just property. It is the symbol of my choice, to choose myself. I protected it as I protected my values and my boundaries. And this time I will not back down, even if some call me selfish. Sitting in the quiet house, I realized everyone has limits that must be respected. I chose to keep mine, and that meant learning to let go of relationships I once thought unbreakable. But sometimes, it's the cracks that reveal who truly values you and who only sees you as a crutch. And you, what about you? If you were in my place, torn between family ties and protecting your own worth, what would you choose? Would you open the door or close it to keep your peace? I truly want to hear your thoughts. Share your perspective in the comments, because maybe your story will help someone else find their strength. And don't forget to follow the channel for more stories to come. Real slices of family, of choices, and of the courage to live the life we deserve.